I'm going to have to be very careful with how many times I say the title of today's film. Let's talk about Candyman from 1992. Not to be confused, of course, with the remake from a few years ago. I will be talking about that in a few weeks' time after talking about the sequels to this one. But this was written and directed by Bernard Rose, based upon the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker, which I've actually read, and it's pretty good. Like, obviously, it's not going to be one-to-one. For one, Liverpool is the original setting, not Chicago. But I think they did well with this adaptation. This stars Tony Todd, Virginia Madsen, Xander Berkeley, and Casey Lemons. And I'm totally prepared for someone to tell me in the comments it's Xander Barkley. I always flip between. But one of the things I really want to talk about before anything else is my love for this film. This is one of those films that when I saw it, I instantly went, I get this, I like it, it's very much something that appeals. But a very good chunk of that is actually because of Helen's theme, and the rest of the music as well, composed by Philip Glass. Not really listened to much of his other stuff outside of this. I mean, I think he did The Truman Show, things like that, but I really love that piece of music. It lives in my head rent-free. Anytime I'm feeling a bit like things are a bit weird and spooky, I just get that doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. I was going to do a backing track for it, but I realised that I wouldn't do it justice. So you just have my normal one. But anyway, this film, yeah. One of the first things in the early scene is seeing Ted Raimi and really struggling to believe him as a, bad boy, hot kind of guy. I'm sorry, but I've seen him in so many roles that just don't fit this mould. But still, like I say, this is one of those things. I enjoy urban legends, I enjoy conspiracy theories, folklore. There's psychological interest there because why do we create these urban legends and these stories? And that's what this film really explores in some detail. Yes, I want to talk about, how well it's put together. The acting with some of the characters. I mean, Stacey isn't amazing throughout the film, but in that first scene when she's in the classroom, the coldness she's giving to Helen is amazingly well done. It reads off the screen. And obviously there's a lot of silence. There's a lot of just waiting for moments to sort of resolve themselves naturally. There's no rush to the next minute. It's, just under 100 minutes, but it doesn't feel like it takes that long, even with this very relatively calm pacing. I could talk, how wonderful some of the scenes are, because the death of Dr. Berg, let's just call it as it is one of the most visceral deaths I've seen on film, I think, ever. There's just something about it that just really unsettles me. The performance of Vanessa Estelle Williams, not to be confused with Vanessa Lynn Williams, as Anne-Marie. And of course, yes, Virginia Madsen and Tony Todd being absolutely amazing. Having scenes where you're seeing him walk, we're focusing on his shoes, but we can't hear his steps. All of this is how the film is presented to us. This is how we're delivering what we need to be looking at. But I don't want to spend too much more time on that. Yes, I love this film. It's well acted, well put together, well paced, well written, well shot, everything. This is borderline a flawless film. There's a few things that perhaps don't work. But what I really want to look at is the psychological, cultural, socio-political elements in this, because it's dripping with it. But before I do that, I do quickly want to say the flashes of the mural are a really good touch. Not only before we get the reveal, but later to cement it and this relationship that is growing. But this has so much there, like I say, psychologically, socio-politically. We have the fact that Helen realises her condo is built to the same specs as Cabrini Green, because it was all meant to be this, new fancy building, and then it's like, wait a minute, no, we've got a divide here. And so they put plaster on the cinder blocks, made it look a bit nicer, sold it for much higher. And we have this. Even now in the world, we have places that are divided through really arbitrary socioeconomic classes. If you go the wrong side of the tracks, as people used to say, there's a reason that phrase exists, because we used to really segment people off. There's elements of it that have been softened. You do sometimes more see a kind of gradual shift perhaps between those, but still we have those distinct areas in a lot of places. I can think of a few near me. You can probably think of a few near you. It's something that happens. And yeah, buildings are just made en masse, and at the time they're the new modern thing, but then they just become what's used for low rent housing or social housing, as we have here. And there's things in this film that obviously haven't aged well. We have Jake using the R word that people don't like anymore, even though back then it was fine. I mean, there's a lot of smoking going on, which we don't really see in films these days unless you're a bad guy. it's of its time. But there's so much that I love about this, and I keep saying that because I do. I just keep reiterating it. But the fact that we have people in the world will ascribe stories to things. We make up stories to understand the world. And this is where urban legends, this is where folklore, this is where conspiracy theories are born from. And sometimes you have a situation where someone just hears of something that happened to a friend of a friend and it just spirals and becomes this big thing like alligators in the sewers. But sometimes there are crimes that happen, and we don't want to accept that this was just an awful act committed by some person maybe with a problem, or just someone who is wired differently. For whatever reason, someone's life has ended, or multiple people's lives have ended, and we struggle to sometimes comprehend and rationalise that. So we make up urban legends. We make up a way of dealing with it. You know, we can only take so much cognitive and emotional load. Conversely, sometimes people may use, you know, urban legends, things like that, as an excuse. We had the Slender Man situation a few years ago, and a bunch of documentaries that were really ill-timed around it and capitalised on it, but that's a whole other problem. So we have a lot here that is building upon these things of, yes, you know, that we have the guy who attacks her, well, the group of guys who attack her in the toilets, because they're using the legend for their own purposes. But then the story of Daniel is the reason the legends exist. Something awful happened and people made a story out of it. And that's what I love here. We have things such as the fact as well that a legend only lives as long as it's told. Every so often something needs to happen to further the Candyman name. In this low-income housing where things are bad enough, and as Anne-Marie says, some of us are just trying to survive. We're not all drug dealers, we're not gangbangers, all that. Some of us are just trying to survive. But in those situations, people are more likely to go, well, it's this, you know, like life's just thrown me a bad time. It happens, we try and rationalise because we don't want to accept it again. And that's where these legends can live. We have an excuse, we have a reason. That thing happened to that person because it was a Candyman. They got it. But yeah, all of this in this package, like I say, so well shot, so well done. And I want to end on a few little bits here. The relationship with Trevor, I think, is amazingly done. He is framed as this unfaithful husband. It's clear he's having an affair with Stacey from like point one, and it's only when she's hospitalised that they actually start to do something, because it's like, well, she's not a problem anymore. And it obviously goes bad, but that last scene before she gets her revenge, which in a way undercuts what I'm about to say, because I think it's very much a Hollywoody thing. He's grieving still. He had a life. He cared for Helen. He shared however much time they had. At one point, he obviously wanted her in his life so much that he said, can we make this official and formal? So him grieving was a beautiful moment. I do think his death undercuts that, unfortunately. It robs that emotional core. But I kind of want to finish on a sort of praise or sort of respect for Daniel's situation, whilst also not, I guess, not approving of the actions. He was a victim of, you know, an horrific act, as Purcell tells it. This story of what happened to him, even if it's been sort of more fancified over time, there's still a core there where something must have happened. So he is a victim of an awful thing. That colours how people react. There's a phrase that, I've seen the joke response to it, which I'll say in a second, but the core of it does ring true here. Hurt people, hurt people. The joke being, I just hear a command twice. But when you've had bad things happen to you, when, you know, you've had trauma, you know, other things that are really, really bad, sometimes all you can think of to do is to pass that on to someone else. You can't just accept that it's just you. A lot of people turn it the other way and say, I don't want that to ever happen to anyone again. But some people do think that, well, I've been hurt, so it's okay for me to hurt others. And I think that's the situation with Daniel here. His relationship with Helen is very much romanticized, similarly to, you know, the Cenobites in the first couple of Hellraiser films, at least. They're not great, they're a bit weird and doing not great things, but there's a romanticism, there's a kind of almost gentlemanly way in both Pinhead and Candyman. I think that's 3 now. I'm keeping tally, I hope. But it's abusive. It is abusive. There's this romanticism to it, yes, but it is an abusive relationship. He manipulates her, cuts her off from everything else in her life, makes it look like she's lost the plot, just so he can take her as a sort of bride in the afterlife. It's not healthy, but again, I can understand what may have caused that. Proving that I'm only human, this is a quick splice in before the end. I forgot to mention something I put in my notes, that I like that this can be read in two ways. We have the paranormal story of Daniel as the Candyman, etc., and that's probably now the fifth, so I'm really worried. But we also have the fact that this is a psychological thing. The fact that the CCTV doesn't show him on at all, these kind of vengeful spirits may not show up. Or Helen's just crazy and she did everything that they're saying. She had a psychotic break. And again, if you discount the end scene, this works best as well. But everything else could potentially be explained by she got too invested, got obsessed, kind of had a small mental breakdown, maybe because she knew that her relationship was on the rocks, and the rest is literally just something she's made up to rationalise it. But maybe it isn't. Maybe there is really a vengeful spirit, and I love it for that basis. So I'm going to come back to me from a bit ago to finish up the video. This is very much something I really, really enjoyed, and I know I remember the next one I think was okay. I really can't remember the third one, and I haven't seen the newer one yet, so we'll see how much my sanity goes over the next few weeks. But thank you very much for letting me talk about a film that I absolutely have adored since point one, and until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and take care. And be my victim.